Hey everybody, I want to talk about a product and platform that I absolutely love and our latest sponsor, Interseller, the prospecting and outreach platform of choice for recruiters and sellers. Whether you're doubling down on business development or recruiting talent, Interseller does all the heavy lifting of finding contact data, automating the email and follow-up process, and syncs all that rich data into 20 plus CRM and ATS platforms. Reach out now and get going on a 2-week free trial and let them know you heard about it from Adam on the podcast today. Check out the link on the website. Appreciate it.
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast where I bring in the best and the brightest from the world of business, marketing, and entrepreneurship to help you harness your own inner tenacity and drive your career forward. My guest today on the podcast is Kerry Michaels, CEO of William Murray Golf. Kerry is an entrepreneur who built WMG during her time with the Chivalry, and we'll dig into the specifics of that story during our conversation. But Kerry essentially pioneered what was one product under the Chive's e-commerce vertical into a full lifecycle brand with numerous individually curated pieces inspired by Bill and the Murray brothers' life and family. And before that, Kerry spent time working with brands like Waterworks and Oakley, where she learned the full scope of operating premium product businesses. Her more recent success with WMG has earned her the title of Women to Watch in 2022 from the Women's President's Organization. So let's get to it. Kerry, welcome to the podcast.
Adam, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm excited to get into it. I'm sure everyone's always asking you every question under the sun about Bill Murray and William Murray Golf, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But I want to hit the rewind button here, and I want to learn more about Kerry. And what stands out to me is your analytical approach to things, which goes all the way back to college, where you studied accounting, finance, and marketing. How important, did you know back then how important it would be to be a generalist? Was that even a mindset, or you were just saying, hey, I'm in college, I got to get through this thing and get out the door?
That is such a great question. No, I did not understand the value of that at the time. I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. My dad was an entrepreneur, so I really wanted to lean into that, but there wasn't a great path in undergrad to be an entrepreneur. And so when I was in business school, I would take finance classes and I was like, yeah, I like this. And then I take marketing. I say, yeah, this is great too. And, I ended up really enjoying all the different aspects of business. And so I was probably one of the very few that graduated without a specific focus. And I just wanted to take the classes that really resonated with me. So that was just something that I think came naturally.
It's interesting. I think about that too. They didn't have, I'm not going to call out your age here. I assume you're maybe within a general range of where I am. I'm 43, in a general range of that. They didn't have those entrepreneurship classes. They really didn't. The closest thing we had, which was kind of crazy, and I've spoken about it before, when I was in high school, I was part of this program called DECA, Distributive Education. It was like a business club, and now is kind of my take into it. But back to your story, because everyone's sick and tired of hearing my story over 250 plus episode 259, by the way. What kind of business did your dad have?
So he was in community development. So he was, background in real estate and construction, and he was building smart communities as I was growing up.
And do you remember one of those early lessons that you took away from watching him, from working with him, from being by his side a bit?
There are so many. I think my dad has always been one of the hardest workers. And so I got to see him, just work his butt off from a very young age. And so that tenacity and that work ethic, I think, really stuck with me. When I talk to other entrepreneurs and things, and people ask me all the time, what does it take to be an entrepreneur? And for me, it really is, it's about grit and just sticking with it when you don't want to. And so that was something my dad modeled for me growing up.
So I'm gonna jump ahead because it's not a question that I was planning on asking, but I kind of want to talk about this for a moment here. So I'm gonna do a quick little flash forward over here. Yeah. So when you're hiring, and whether it be now with William Murray or any of your past positions, how do you what type of questions do you ask? How do you get to those character and personality traits in a 30, 45-minute interview? Because obviously these are the qualities you look for when you build teams. How do you get to those?
Yeah.
It's tough.
So I will say there's been a lot of trial and error over the years, because I think for me, everyone says they want to work for a startup. And so I'm like, yeah, do you want to work for a startup? Do you know what that means? And everyone says yes to that.
Of course
And what I learned, in running William Murray Golf is that not everyone should work for a startup. And so there are certain personality traits that you really do have to start to screen for in that process. And, I try to get to questions around, how do they respond to difficult situations? How do they respond when their boss comes in and tells them, oh, no, we're going to pivot and we're going to do something else now?
Throw it away.
Yeah, just throw, whatever you were working on, don't worry about it. We're going to pivot and move. That can really throw a lot of people off. And I think, really trying to figure out how to find people that are adaptable, that are curious and always wanting to learn, and that aren't stuck in this mindset of, well, what exactly is on this job description? What exactly am I going to be doing every day? Because I can't tell you. I don't know. I don't know all the things. I'm hiring you to help us put these, processes and things in place. So I don't know that I have a perfect set of questions, but I do try to hone in on some of those personality traits.
It's so interesting. So, everyone knows that, in the last month, there have been 60,000 plus layoffs at all these big tech companies. And one of the things that I've been talking about with folks in the recruitment community is, aside from the fact that there's going to be a ton of amazing, talented folks out there, these folks are used to working in very large matrixed organizations. And some of them, as you're kind of alluding to, are going to want to come to a startup. Startups are going to be hiring there. So you've worked at big places, Oakley and Waterworks, and not too small, relatively large organizations. What advice would you give folks out there to help them with that transition, to help them go from these large organizations with tons of resources where you're going to have to roll up your sleeves and get scrappy now, people?
Yeah. I think one thing that I tell our team all the time is when you work in a startup, it is an opportunity to do things you would never have the chance to do in a larger organization. And you have this chance to really flex your muscles and to expand that mindset if you're willing and able to learn. So for people making that transition, they need to see those tough things that you run into in a startup as an opportunity, because you also have to do a lot with a little.
Right.
And so if you're used to having these great big budgets and you're used to having a very set structure and, process for doing something, it's not going to look like that in a startup. And you have to be open-minded. You have to have a positive mindset. Because there's probably going to be a lot of things that frustrate you along the way. And so how do you deal with that? And how do you really embrace it and see it as an opportunity?
Yeah. I think if I was interviewing and if I was running talent at a startup and someone from one of the FANG or MANG, whatever the acronym of the day is, was interviewing, I think I would have to ask those type of questions and figure out a way to get to the heart of it. Like, listen, do you know what you're getting yourself into? And so everyone's obviously going to say yes because they're looking for a job, but trying to figure out those real qualities there. So continuing with the This Is Your Life, Kerry Michaels part of the show here. Let's talk about the time before William Murray Golf. You're working for Starlink Eyewear. What was that experience like, and how did that lead to the Chive?
Yeah. So really, prior to the Chive, I had touched on so many different things in business. I had been in marketing research. I had been in strategy. At Oakley, I was really doing a lot in the e-com space and building out a learning management system, which, it's a whole nother show. But it was, my career was really varied. And what you're touching on with Starlink Eyewear, that was, I was doing consulting work. And so I was touching on a lot of different things and kind of starting to bring things together. And that was really, for me, what I loved was being able to learn new things. And, it's fascinating when I look back now on my career, there wasn't a single job that I took where I already knew how to do the job. It was when I had an ops role, it was the first time I had been in ops. When I was in strategy, it was the first time I was going into strategy. So that I think for me is also another big takeaway. And I'm like, gosh, I don't think I knew it. I think I was afraid I was going to look like I was hopping around too much, but I wanted to challenge myself.
That is some really interesting advice. And going back to this kind of thread that we've been talking about with the recent layoffs, I mean, my advice to a lot of folks out there is be open-minded of where your transferable skills are, where maybe you might have to take a slight either, step backwards or, you're not really going up in salary or anything, just because you might have an opportunity to learn something new, take a new position where you could kind of be in track. I mean, I think about it all the time. My career trajectory is kind of all over the place. And I come from the DTC world. When I worked at SiriusXM, during that Web 1 days, in the beginning of e-commerce. And that experience to me is invaluable because now I could talk e-commerce, even though it's years past, but those core foundational elements of it. The chive was pumping when you made the move over there.
Yes.
What drew you over there? What connected you with the chive and specifically working on the there's a little bit of a backstory to William Murray Golf, right? Like people don't realize like it wasn't like an authorized thing by his estate. There were some images out there that you could use. Let's give everyone the kind of gist. It wasn't like, hey, Bill Murray's knocking the door and wants to launch a golf brand yet.
Right. I before even starting at the chive, you're right. It was back in the heyday. I think, it's still incredibly popular, but it was really kind of building up at the time. And I was so fascinated with their customer loyalty. And I was like, wow, they have built this fan base,
crazy
and this,
brand,
group of people that are obsessed with the chive. And so as somebody who had been in consumer brands and really fascinated with, I was just so fascinated with what really made people tick. I wanted to understand what this community was all about. And I wanted to understand what this brand was about. And so that was really kind of what drew me into the chive. And so, from there, the chive had Bill Murray's likeness on t-shirts.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've seen him, it was
silhouette,
really just,
right?
Yeah, a little silhouette of Bill's face. And then they would dress him up for St. Patrick's Day and 4th of July and all the holidays. And they would sell, an insane number of t-shirts very quickly. And then they had done the one t-shirt with our now William Murray Golf logo. And they did it for charity. And they sold, a few thousand in, 24 to 48 hours. And I was just so in awe. How did they do this? And but and chatting with the founder, John Resig there, I was like, gosh, this could be something bigger. This could be a standalone brand. And so that was kind of the start of the idea.
But didn't you think back then that golf, and still is to an extent a little bit too stiff, and the whole Bill Murray image, applying that to golf, really just, putting his personality and character into it?
Yeah, absolutely. I had come from, most recently before the chive, I had been at Oakley. And I loved Oakley and I love the sport performance world. And, what I had seen though, is that golf was super stuffy. And, at the time in 2015, everyone was talking about golf courses were closing, there wasn't as much interest in the sport. Young people just wanted a different pace of play. And they were having a hard time attracting people to golf. And so I was like, well, because, everyone looks the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's stuffy and you can't listen to your music and it's expensive and
it takes a lot of time, takes a whole day.
It takes a whole day. Yeah. And so it just wasn't as accessible. And so then that was the light bulb moment. It was like, oh, well, it's not accessible today, but who could make it accessible? Bill Murray.
Anybody.
I think everyone knows him from Caddyshack, but the more research I did, I was like, oh my gosh, wow, Bill is actually a really amazing golfer. And he's one of 9 kids. There were 6 boys, and him and his brothers were all inducted into the Caddy Hall of Fame because they all grew up caddying. And so there was this authenticity to it where I was like, wow, he's a really great golfer and he's out there golfing. It's not just the movie. And so I thought there was this white space to really bring some personality onto the course. And what I say is to break away from that sea of blue stripe polos.
It's interesting too. And correct me if I'm getting this story, make sure and keep me straight with the story here, that there was a bunch of brands, people out there doing some stuff. And one of his brothers brought it to his attention and he said, well, let's figure it out with the brand that's doing it the biggest and the best. And And walk us through that story a little bit. And there was a phone call. How did that work out?
Oh, yeah. So Bill and his brothers host a golf tournament every year called the Caddyshack Golf Tournament. And the Chive had been a sponsor at this golf tournament. And so at this point, this was 2015, I had ended up kind of building out a pitch deck, one of those more formal pitch decks. Here's what the brand could look like. Here's some ideas.
Right. Projections, yada, yada.
And we were hoping, the idea was to be able to pitch Bill at this Caddyshack golf tournament. And so we did reach out to his lawyer and said, hey, we have this concept we'd like to pitch him. And, he had said, I don't think that's a great idea. You should
Imagine being Bill's lawyer. Jeez.
Yeah. It would be a tough job for sure. And he was like, listen, he said once, yes, don't try and go after anything else. Just leave him alone. And so, when we were there, I actually had a chance encounter with Joel Murray, who is Bill's youngest brother, met him on the course. And, I said, hey, Joel, I like your polo, but I think we should make something better for you.
And I assume you were wearing the logo, right? You were rocking you didn't want to rub. Yeah.
No, we hadn't even we were not wearing the logo at that point. It didn't exist.
Yeah. Just a couple t-shirts. Yep.
Yeah. And he had said, I'd love to make a better polo. He was like, my brothers and I have always wanted to do golf apparel. We just don't know how to get into it. And I said, well, I think I might have an answer for you. We do here at the Chive and would love to talk to you more about a concept. And he said, great, hop on the golf cart. And so 3 hours later, that was kind of the initial pitch.
Hey everybody, first I'd like to thank you all for spending time with me and my guest on the podcast. This show is my canvas to showcase amazing people from the world of recruiting, entrepreneurship, and leadership, and unpack their career journeys for everyone to learn from. But this show is also a business generator for me, as well as creating thought leadership and endless amazing content. And I've taken what I've learned in the past 3 years and over 200 recorded and 100 live shows and distilled it down into a digital playbook that I call the Pause Course. Now you could learn how I build, manage, and produce the podcast and use it to drive real business development and relationships. Today, I'm sharing all of my secrets behind the podcast, and you can get it all at thepausecourse.com. This course is for anyone, whether you're starting out or an advanced podcaster using it for B2B or B2C. It's filled with all of my insights, learnings, tips, tricks, and templates. So get it now at thepausecourse.com and learn all my secrets. Thanks.
Bill Murray, who's encountered him, the stories are legendary. Do you have your Bill Murray story the first time? Have you met him? I assume.
Yes.
Okay, so yes. What was your first encounter?
Our first encounter really was a year after I pitched Joel Murray. And it was still at the Caddyshack Golf Tournament. And so Brandon Barrett, who is my co-founder, he and I had a chance in 2016, right after we signed a contract with Bill and his family to do this deal together. We went and presented designs and we said, hey, our first collection is going to launch in the fall. It's going to be in about 6 or 8 months. Here are some ideas. Here's what we're thinking. Here's some samples of fabric. And he got really into it. And I was, it was a very, memorable day for us. And one of the first polos that we presented looked like a Cubs jersey. And I forget what our initial name was for the jersey, to be honest with you. But he looked at it. And if you know, the curse of the Cubs and whatnot, it was a big deal. And we were like, do you think it's a good idea to go out with a polo that looks like a Cubs jersey? He said, yes, 100%. And you're going to name it This Is the Year. And I was like, ooh, do you think that's a good name? And he was like, yes, don't second guess me. That's the name. So we said, all right, fine, let's do it. And we launched that polo on his birthday, September of 2016.
And what happened?
And then the Cubs went on, 6 or 7 weeks later to go and win the World Series.
That's crazy.
that was very serendipitous for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I have a Bill Murray story. I'm not going to share on the air here. I'm going to save it for. It's not that it's like it's a good story. I had a good moment with him, and I'll leave it at that. I'll extend that for another time. But the show's about you, Kerry. It's not about me. You know, it's my story. So, talk to us a little bit about that transition period for you in your career at the time, being with the Chive and in that capacity to taking on this role of leading this new brand, emerging into the marketplace and building a company pretty much from scratch.
Yeah. It's really interesting too. I think one thing that's, kind of unique about Brandon and I's founding story is that we really started as intrapreneurs. And so we incubated this idea under the Chive, and it's kind of a unique and different way to start a company. And so we did have support of designers, and we had, back office with, accounting and financial support and whatnot. And so we were able to really focus on the brand and what we wanted to stand for and how we wanted to position ourselves very early on. But really, it was our first season in the fall of 2016 that we were with the Chive. And then in 2017, January of 2017, we split off and we became our own entity. And so while we had all this support along the way, then it was 2017, we split off, we went out and had to go raise our own money. And it was almost like starting the business all over again and kind of setting a new foundation. And that's really where we were challenged, and we grew so much in those years. And, that was a fun part of our journey.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Jen. And let's talk about one of the first big stumbling blocks. That was, I like to say, a hard lesson learned the hard way. Do you remember that?
So many.
One that stood out to you, one that you really said, this could be really bad if we let it get bad, and let's figure this out now and course correct.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest early lessons for me was, and it sounds so simple, but it was managing cash. And so, when you're in business school, you're taught to look at a cash flow statement. You're always taught cash is king, but I didn't quite understand how that, was going to play out for us. And so when you're in apparel, we were placing deposits, 9+ months in advance. And those were huge, payments, especially for us in the early days. And we were growing so fast. I mean, we were selling out of product, very quickly. And so the next order was like double that size.
And projections versus cash. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, projections were so great. And so, would I do anything differently? I'm not sure. But sometimes I'm like, I wish we had grown a little bit slower so that we could have kept up with some of that, the cash and the momentum early on. But it led us to a place where we were constantly raising money. We were chasing the money to chase the POs, and that's just a really tough place to be.
Yeah, and it's tough too because you're projecting. You're saying, all right, well, we're based on the success of this last product, and you go out there and you do double the order, and what if it's a dud? Yeah. What if it flops? What if you had market saturation? And that's another interesting one too. I mean, what's been the approach? I mean, you have an extremely strong background, analytical mindset. What's your approach to forecasting a trend of maybe a new product line? And it's a bet in some cases. So how do you make it an educated one?
It's a bet. You're right. I think one thing I do love about my job is that I'm able to blend the creative and the analytical. When you're looking at, especially for a brand like us that's so print heavy, I can't just look at past sales and say, oh, the black solid polo was our best seller, so I can buy into that again. It is we're a print business, and it's really hard to forecast that. So a lot of it is on gut. I look at the stuff, and my barometer is, if we were sitting next to each other, having a drink after the game of golf, would I want you to go change first? Or would I be like, oh no, I love your shirt. You look great. And so some of that is my litmus test is, do I want to sit next to you at dinner or for a drink? And, do I like what you're wearing? As long as you
showered after the 18 holes. So one of the strong things you spoke about is the Chive's brand and the affinity of the folks who love it for so long. I mean, the Chive itself, you could do a whole show on the Chive itself, is such an innovator in the content space. How have you built the loyal fan base and keep engaging with your community with WMG?
Yeah, I think from the get-go, customer service has been at the forefront of everything we do. And I say that, I think a lot of companies say that, but for us, people think that Bill Murray is the one behind the keyboard answering the emails, right?
No.
And, while, he actually has done that a few times, we are representing him in the public's eye. And so we take that very seriously. And we want to make sure that people feel valued and feel heard. And so we've taken huge strides in making sure that we're answering every customer very quickly. And we're gonna slip up and we're gonna fail sometimes and we're gonna screw up, but we always own up to that, and that's important to me. And I think that helps build trust and it helps build loyalty.
I truly, because my wife and I are pretty avid online shoppers, and I'm a self-admit, I'm a sucker for Instagram ads. They get me. So I don't know what they do with targeting. I like, it's so hyper targeted these days. It's really creepy. Right? Like, were you just listening to my conversation? Did you read my emails? And I think they do. I mean,
they probably do.
They probably do there. But the customer service angle is so critical. That first experience you have, and I always give a brand the benefit of the doubt. Something may happen in shipping, something may happen with an order, but how you handle it and how you remedy the situation. Yes. I mean, there's nothing worse like when you buy something and like you have to pay for the return label back and they give you a hard time with it. I mean, I'm not going to name a brand. There's one brand where there's a complete disconnect between, and it's a high-end retail, consumer merchandise, disconnect between their online and their retail, where you can't exchange something online. You could only return it and you have to process a new order. Not fun.
Not fun.
Not fun. So it's little things there. I mean, trial and error, right? Like, and figuring it out. What advice would you give for CEOs in your position to really ensure that the community stays strong?
I think it starts with being customer first and not thinking that you have all the answers. You really do need to listen to your customer and find a way for them to be able to give you feedback, whether that's through, surveying them, focus groups, or answering customer emails. I think always remembering that every sale, there's a customer behind every sale is really, it's an important lesson.
Yeah. Keep it written on your hand, on your desk, wherever there. So I wanted to read a quote where you broke down the role of a CEO and particularly discussed the last line. So it reads, quote, tell me if you remember this.
I don't.
Quote, the CEO is challenged with planning for the downside and looking to the future. You always have to be prepared to execute on a worst case scenario to keep business running. However, you must continue to find the white space, the opportunities to expand your business. It's a balance between being a realist and an optimist, end quote. Yeah. How do you create that balance without getting stuck too far in the light and dark? How do you do that on a daily basis? I need to hear this.
So to be honest, as a startup, I do feel like I do this every day because I'm talking with our head of finance, I'm talking with accounting on a very regular basis, and I'm saying, okay, what's really happening right now, and I know what we say we want to do, but where are we trending? And so always being a realist, and this is what's actually happening, regardless of what kind of goals and things we have in place. And so managing, and forecasting cash is part of that planning for the downside for us, and making sure that we're ready for it. And so I'm looking out 6 to 12 months on a very regular basis to make sure we're prepared. But on the flip side, I mean, you have to be going for the bigger goals, and you have to set your sights high. You've got to keep pushing. And, I know in today, 2023, it's, some would say we're already in a recession, or we're about to be. That can be kind of a scary place to be, but you've got to have the balance of both. And I think that's what's inspiring. That's what people want to be a part of. No one wants to be a part of a brand that's like just limping along and, doesn't have great expectations and goals set.
That's solid advice. So before I bring it home here, I got to end on Bill Murray too, and I'd love to know what your favorite Bill Murray movie is. If there's a particular scene, a particular moment, and I don't know.
You know, that's a great question. It's funny because I asked this of a lot of people that we interview as well. There's so many ones to pull from. I think some of the classic ones are still my favorite. Ghostbusters. I have two young kids, and they've recently gotten into Ghostbusters, and it's really fun to watch with them, as a family. So I love that one. Love Stripes. I love Meatballs. Meatballs is another like really great coming of age. You've got that
old school Dirty 80s movies is so good.
Yeah. So those are some of the classics and some of my favorites.
For me, it's Ghostbusters. On my shelf over there, I have my Lego Ghostbusters, and I'm going to do something I never do on the show. I'm going to take my camera here, and I'm going to show you something absolutely crazy. This is crazy here. Hold on. We're going to do this.
Okay.
Look what's on my wall right over here.
Oh my gosh.
And this is a moment. This is a moment for me right here, and I'm going to tell everybody why that moment is so important for me. That moment in Ghostbusters is them recognizing that they just did a job well done. They are covered in slime. They just came out. They busted those ghosts. They sucked them in, right? And they're just proud. They're just proud. We worked, dirty work. We got our shit done, and we took care of business. And that's why I love that poster. And I look at it, and it's funny. That poster reminds me just to work hard. It really does. And Bill Murray, I mean, it's obviously we all know Peter Venkman, and just it's the movie itself. So let's wrap it up here. Kerry, what is the single greatest piece of advice that you've ever received that you take action on every day?
Yeah. So I think one of them is, when I was first out of college, I had a really hard time finding a job. And I remember telling my parents, I'm just not qualified for all these jobs that I want to do. And my dad said, just because you haven't done it yet doesn't mean you can't. You can figure it out along the way. And so since then, I've never applied for a job where I check all the boxes. That's something I think about every day.
I love it. That's solid. And Kerry, last but not least, I mean, you look back on your life and career, and there's those times that were tough, those times that you struggled, and you had to reach down deep inside and harness that inner tenacity and pull yourself up. And on the flip side, you sit here with gratitude. You're running a fantastic brand, 2 little kids, beautiful family, happy with life. What keeps you focused? What is your beacon? Kerry Michaels, what is your North Star in life?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think my North Star, kind of growing up has always been to be an entrepreneur and to build companies. And I'm doing that now, and it's fulfilling and challenging and all the things, but I'm starting to realize that what continues to energize me is about something deeper and more than that. It's to build something that really has a positive impact. Even if it is, like William Murray Golf, just bringing a smile to people's faces every day.
I love it. That's fantastic. Kerry, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the show. I want everyone to check out WilliamMurrayGolf.com. Where else could folks find you? Where could they connect with you? Where could they learn more?
My LinkedIn, Kerry Kaloran Michaels, and my Instagram, which is Kerry_WMG.
Awesome. Good stuff. Kerry, hang with me for one moment here as we sign off. Great episode. Actionable. Fantastic story. Definitely check out WilliamMurrayGolf.com. I'm going to be hitting up WilliamMurrayGolf.com for Father's Day for my dad. And this will air before. Oh, shoot. I just gave it away. I know my dad listens to every episode. So I'm not getting you something from William Murray Golf. Definitely not getting that. Kerry, thanks for joining me today. Hang with me one moment here.
Thanks, Adam.
Awesome. And everyone listening at home, if this episode resonated with you, sharing means caring. So share it, leave a review, rating goes a long way. Guess what? You want to reach out to me? My email, adam@nhptalentgroup.com. Shoot me a message, say hello. I'd love to connect with you. And everyone out there, you know where to find out more at thepodcast.com. Follow us on all the social media handles. Remember, take care of each other, look out for one another, and catch us next week for another good episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.